Imagine a place that feels like a warm hug, a place of comfort, somewhere you know you can always return to when you need a break. For me, that place is Moominvalley. I unfortunately did not grow up with the Moomins, but I started learning about them as I got older and spent more time on the internet. Though I never delved too deeply beyond, oh, those characters are cute. In fact, for a while, I thought they were a Japanese thing because I would see the occasional plush in videos from Japan that I was watching. All I really knew was that they were called Moomins and they were cute. It wasn't until much later that I finally started to learn more about them. The Moomins began their life in the mind of Tove Jansson, a Finnish author and artist. Born in Helsinki in 1914, her family was always an artistic one. Her father was a sculptor and her mother was an illustrator and graphic designer. It makes sense that she would also follow a similar path, since my family situation is a little bit similar. My grandmas on both sides of the family were very into crafting. My grandma on my dad's side was more of a seamstress, while my grandma on my mom's side did a bit of everything, from sewing to painting. Because of that, my mother also grew up learning how to paint and sew, and then that baton was passed into my hands. Granted, I don't know how to sew yet, and I'm not nearly as good at painting as they are, but I like the process, and I want to improve little by little. To that end, it's also no surprise that Tova's siblings would enter artistic fields too. One brother became a photographer, and the other also became an author and cartoonist, and would later help with the comics. It's almost a little funny that for a series that many people find comforting, the Moomin Troll's initial design apparently began as an ugly caricature of Immanuel Kant. The very first Moomin book was published in 1945, titled The Moomins and the Great Flood. From there, 2 more books would follow, and Tova would be approached about turning them into a comic strip. The first Moomin comic strip would be published in 1954. Many of the characters are based on the people in Tova's life. It's widely believed that Moomin Mama and Moomin Papa are based on her parents. A few different characters are based on her romantic partners, like Snufkin being based on the man she nearly married, Thingamy and Bob being based on Tova and Vivica Bandler, one of her girlfriends at the time, and Tutiki, based on the woman Tova would eventually spend the rest of her life with, Tuliki. My experience with the Moomins didn't start until 2019, when the latest animated series first started coming out. I don't remember exactly how I stumbled into it, but once I finally sat down to start watching it, there was something about it that just immediately captivated me. A slow, gentle life in the countryside surrounded by nature and incredibly relatable characters. There's never really any danger, and even if concerning things happen, the characters just take it in stride and keep on living as usual. The valley floods? They just find a new home in a floating theater, until the problem is resolved by Sniff pulling the literal plug that releases the floodwater and life returns to normal. Moomin Troll is a relatable protagonist, wanting to be taken seriously and not be treated as a child anymore. He encounters all the usual struggles that come with growing up, like self-confidence, and most episodes involve him learning some kind of lesson, like when he tries to play his father in the play adaptation of Moomin Papa's memoirs, feeling unsure until he wakes up to his tail turning gold. It boosts his confidence up until his tail begins to lose hair, eventually completely returning to normal again. But it's through this that he comes to realize that he can't play his father because they're different people, and that's okay. The best person to play the role is, of course, his father. The episode adapting his discovery of the little dragon also teaches the important lesson that sometimes you have to let things go. And maybe also that wild animals shouldn't be kept as pets. Moomin Mama is a quietly calm, reassuring presence. She always seems to know the right thing to say and is probably the most level-headed in a crisis. She's a reminder that sometimes you need to slow down and take a step back, to take a breather. Your problems tend to seem that much smaller when you take the time to enjoy some tea or a home-cooked meal. Her gentle demeanor is a steadying presence. No matter what's happening, you know she's the kind of character that will always be there for you. It's that steady support that plays a strong part in helping to restore Ninny's visibility. She provides a bell in case Ninny wishes to be heard, allows her to sleep in as late as she likes, and even makes her new clothes. These are immensely helpful in making Ninny begin to feel safe enough to be herself. accompanied by Moomintroll's little efforts to get to know her and let her know that he and everyone else are there for her. Except Sniff, who briefly sets the progress back several paces. Seriously, why is he like that? Moomin Papa is over the top and bombastic, a habitual embellisher of his tales. You can never quite know just how much of what he's saying is true. He was right about the Hattie Fatteners, though. He has immense confidence in himself, and it's rather unshakable. He can be a bit insensitive at times, but it's never out of malice. He means well, it just doesn't always come across the way he means it. Referencing Ninny again, he was trying to help, but his methods weren't what Ninny needed. Still, he is capable of softer encouragement too, like when he and Moomintroll switch roles in the play, encouraging his son to take up the role of director instead. That unshakable confidence, no matter what life throws at you, is honestly inspiring. I wish I had the confidence to force everyone to listen to me recite my own book at every given opportunity. Though I guess that's kind of what this channel is, huh? Little Mai is vim, vigor, spite, and mischief all rolled up into a tiny package. She is unapologetically herself. Though she is rough around the edges and seems abrasive, she's also helpful in her own way, even if it might seem like she's being kind of a pain at the time. She pushes people to stand up for themselves. It's also a little funny how often she ends up falling asleep and ends up drifting off somewhere completely different by the time she wakes up. Like when she fell asleep after eating everything in a picnic basket Moomintroll and Snork Maiden were planning on eating on their romantic outing. Or in another episode with a similar setup, she falls asleep in a basket and falls off the boat and winds up encountering Snufkin. Little Mai is probably the textbook definition of tough love, but I suppose one has to find themselves quickly with as many siblings as she has, which plays a part in why she ends up staying with the Moomins instead of returning home. She expresses the desire for a place of her own, to have some peace and quiet, and honestly, seeing her siblings, I really can't blame her for that. It could be argued that maybe sometimes she's a bit too aggressive, but she's just as much an irreplaceable part of the family. And if I had to choose, I think I'd much rather have little Mai around than Sniff. I don't want to dunk on any character too hard, but Sniff never really seems to add much other than some wild, selfish scheme. Like, is his whole deal really just capitalism? Too Tiki is another quietly reassuring character. She's always optimistic and incredibly wise. She's helpful, but doesn't coddle. I think she's very similar to Moomin Mama in a way. She was the one who first went to help Ninny until they were separated in the mist. When Moomintroll wakes up in the midst of his hibernation, she's there to welcome him in and provides him with a warm place to rest from the cold. She establishes herself as a refuge of sorts for those that are different, willing to go out of her way to help someone or something if they need it. Like Ninny, for example, or the invisible shrews she shares the Moomin's bathing house with. But, like I said, she doesn't coddle. When Moomintroll is dismissive of his ancestor, saying that they can't possibly be related as it escapes out into the snow, Too Tiki sends him off to bring his ancestor back, as if she knows there's a lesson to be learned from this. And she ends up being right, as Moomintroll comes to realize that he really isn't all that different from his ancestor after all. She's sort of the opposite of anxiety in a way. What I mean by that is, at one point, Moomintroll asks her how she can be sure the invisible shrews are really shrews if they're invisible. And she responds with the line, "All things are so very uncertain, and that's exactly what makes me feel reassured." Not knowing for certain is exactly what makes anxiety so rough, but Too Tiki finds comfort in it. Of course, maybe I'm misunderstanding something fundamental here, but that's just my interpretation of it. It's a mindset I wish I could share, and something that perhaps we could all learn from. The last character I'd like to touch on is my favorite, as you can probably tell. There are a lot more characters, but if I talked about all of them, we'd be here all day. So we'll finish off with none other than Snufkin. He's the character I think that's maybe changed the most between each version. The core thing that remains the same across all the versions is that he's a wanderer. He leaves Moominvalley once winter looms on the horizon, and when the snow begins to thaw and spring returns to the valley, so too does Snufkin. In the books, he's a little more sociable and seems to spend more time around other characters, and the 90s version of Snufkin seems to be a brighter character entirely, perhaps a little more chaotic with his joyful utterance in the English dub of, "Let's go fill Moominvalley with crime!" But the 2019 version is maybe a little more in line with his character later on in the books. The 2019 version of Snufkin is more introspective. He's still polite, but he likes having his space and quiet moments where he can be alone, shown with his initial frustration when TD Wu keeps interrupting his solitude. Though he does feel a bit guilty for being so short with him, and eventually relents to give TD Wu his name. Large gatherings set him on edge, having been known to just quietly slip away from parties. He also leaves the valley each time without saying goodbye to anyone face to face, but he always leaves a letter. The freedom of nature is important to him, and he hates land being blocked off to be parks. Together with Little Mai, he antagonizes a park keeper, pulling up signs and burning them, and eventually letting loose a bunch of hattie fatteners. However, hearing that Moomin Troll and Snork Maiden have been accused in his place, he returns to take responsibility because he cares, and he doesn't want them to take the fall for him when they did nothing wrong. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. He resolutely stands up for what he believes is right. Snufkin finds comfort being in nature, in the beauty of the land around him, and inspiration for his music. The very first time we're introduced to him in the 2019 series, he's in the midst of composing his new spring tune and admits that while he misses Moomin Troll, the song isn't ready yet, so he feels like he can't return just yet. Despite his loner's tendencies, Snufkin cares and continues to return to the valley each year. For all his wandering, Moominvalley is where he spends most of his time. I saw a lot of myself in Snufkin, and still do, to be honest. I love the idea of living in harmony with nature, respecting the boundaries of wild spaces, taking only what you need and leaving little impact. I'm uncomfortable in large crowds, and while I can manage it without feeling the need to flee, it can feel a little claustrophobic on a busy day in the grocery store. I too would like to travel, or at least have a nice little woodland trail to walk every day. I think Snufkin reminds us to take care of the world around us, and to stand up against injustice when we see it. In the chaos and cruelty of today, I think that's more important now than it's ever been. We have to take care of nature so it continues to exist and provide for the generations that come after us. We have to stand up against people who are blinded by prejudice and hate just to maintain our rights. But with the state of the world being as it is today, I think it's also important to have a place to retreat to when everything gets to be too much. When we need to take a break from all the bad news. When we need to remember that there is still good in this world. Remember that it's okay to take time for yourself, and know that places like Moominvalley will always be there to welcome you home. That ended up being a lot heavier than I expected. The point I was trying to make through all of this is that there's something we can take away from each character. From Moomin Mama's gentle reassurance to Moomin Papa's unflappable confidence, to Little Mai's unapologetic authenticity. I want to try and live my life a little more like the Moomins. I'll always retain my Snufkin-like qualities, my desire to wander about in nature for sure, but one day I too hope to have Moomin Papa's level of confidence, and to be as unapologetically myself as Little Mai. I'm getting there, one step at a time, and I truly hope the same for all of you. As always, here's a look at the final picture. I got a bit lazy with the grass this time, and just used a brush for the blades of grass. Though I honestly like it a whole lot better than my attempt in the Yashahime video where I didn't use a brush. Though I am very pleased with the little clumps of flowers that I drew in, I'm wondering if maybe I should have added some really teeny tiny ones into the background to make it look a little more visually interesting. That said, this is a redraw of a painting I tried to do with watercolor that I liked it, but I wasn't entirely happy with how it turned out. There were also way more trees in the background of it, so when I decided to do this one, I was like, I'm not drawing all those trees again. I need to be kinder on my hand. because I literally have to wear a compression glove now when I draw. But that said, I'm overall pleased with the end result. It turned out way better than I expected it would. If you've made it to the end of this video, thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I dearly love this world and these characters that Tova created. Whenever I feel down or just need to take a break, I always return to Moominvalley. It certainly can't fix everything, but it does give me the encouraging push I need to dust myself off and keep trying. If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like and consider subscribing, but obviously no pressure. I mostly talk about anime, and I'm starting to do more art-focused videos as well. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon!